So happy homecoming season. I'm today's co-host, Nava. This is our second of 3 episodes inspired by homecoming. So as it relates to homecoming, in addition to the parties, fashion, shows, concerts, and halftime, there's the actual football game. Today, we're going to chat about elite high school athletes opting to enroll at historically Black colleges and universities as opposed to predominantly white institutions. We're really excited to explore this with 2 student sports writers at 2 HBCU student newspapers. I will let you 2 introduce yourself.
My name is Kyra Nicole Grant. I'm a senior broadcast journalism major and sports administration minor from the illustrious Howard University by way of Jersey City, New Jersey. And I serve as the sports editor of our school newspaper, the Hilltop.
So my name is Trey Wilson. I'm a third-year sports management major attending Hampton University. I'm from Plainfield, New Jersey, and my primary role at the Hampton Script is a sports photojournalist.
We have a full Jersey party in the house. We have Jersey City, we have Plainfield, we got South Orange up in here. Thanks for
joining us. So we all know that HBCUs provide a safe space for Black students to be educated, right? We actually conducted a survey of Black students currently attending predominantly white institutions. 89 students responded. The majority of students, 52%, were class of 2022, that is. And then the 3 other years were basically evenly distributed. So 78% of students did not feel there was adequate mental health services for Black students. 87% of students felt psychological pressure to succeed to prove they deserve their admission to their school. And 69% said they confronted racial bias from peers, and 60% said they did not feel their campus was an inclusive environment for Black students. So this was a survey that we did, but there are lots of peer-reviewed articles based on studies that have been conducted that mirror much of our findings in terms of the Black experience at predominantly white schools. There's a paper published named A Response to Racism, How HBCU Enrollment Grew in the Face of Hatred. It was based on a 2019 study conducted by Janelle Williams and Dr. Robert Palmer. They conducted interviews with 80 Black freshmen and sophomore undergraduate students across 4 HBCUs. One of the top 3 themes in their choices was to enroll at an HBCU was for the lack of safe spaces in high school and experiences of blatant racism and microaggressions as well from both teachers and non-Black peers in high school. Not everyone is as well versed in the world of college sports. Can you 2 explain specifically why HBCUs are such a hard sell for elite high school athletes?
Because a lot of HBCUs are not able to compete with these powerful PWIs in the athletics with facilities and training and resources. So, for example, Hampton and their football resources can't compete with something such as Ohio State, because a lot of these power schools have NFL-sized stadiums, and you get the press and coverage of a professional athlete. For example, I have someone I went to high school with and used to play basketball with, and he ended up going to Wake Forest, and he's verified on Instagram. So you get bigger coverage and more publicity going to these bigger schools than these HBCUs, and that's more beneficial on the athletic standpoint, because also you have to realize a lot of, especially elite athletes from a very early stage, they're focused on getting to the biggest professional league and being the best player they can be. So knowing that, you know where your resources are and what schools you can go to that have a better chance of getting you to the league. So it doesn't look as lucrative coming to an HBCU and playing maybe in the SWAC or the MEAC or possibly the Big South, rather than going to North Carolina and competing in the ACC and playing for Duke or playing for North Carolina and playing other big schools with other top talent that could possibly be getting drafted in the next couple of years.
And these acronyms that you use, like you're talking about the ACC, are these conferences?
Yes, those are athletic conferences.
Okay.
I think it's the issue of resources, amenities, and just TV deals in terms of big revenue. A lot of these schools, the premier talent decide to go there because they have large TV deals and they want to be popular, they want to be seen, they want to be scouted, and they want to make it to the NBA and the NFL. And oftentimes, when you're chasing your dreams, you feel like you have to travel the most popular route. And like our old alum, the late Chadwick Boseman, said, sometimes the popular way to go may not be the best for you in the end, per se, in terms of just character building, being a well-rounded person. So I definitely agree with Trey. I do think that TV deals, revenue, access to opportunities, a lot of those things play a big role when it comes to scouting and just getting great talent to come to your school.
So I'd like to establish a baseline for myself and also for listeners. Can either of you explain what a revenue-generating sport is versus a non-revenue generating sport?
The difference between revenue generating sports and non-revenue generating sports is basically within the title, whichever sports are bringing in the most money. So for example, basketball and football are your two main revenue generating sports because you have a lot of money going into basketball, especially Division I college basketball, because March Madness brings in loads of money every year, and that's just 1 month. So you have your March Madness, and then you have your conference, all your conference tournaments, and then your national TV games. So for example, basketball is revenue generating because they open up the season with a tournament with 4 to 8 top 25 ranked teams all playing in a showcase at a NBA arena on national TV. So that's revenue generating for all the schools involved, the programs, then the TV stations that are airing them. And then football is similar because all the games are on national TV. So you see games such as, although we are all based in Jersey, you can always catch an Alabama or LSU game because that's revenue generating. They have these national TV deals.
Is Power 5, are these things like actual conferences, or are these like names that sort of like colloquial names that are used in the sports world?
The Power 5 consists of the Big 10, the Big 12, SEC, ACC, and the Pac-12 conferences. It's not officially named the Power 5. It's just the name that sports fans decide to give these conferences because they house most of the talent in terms of the Division I schools. I think it's about 65 of those schools consistent of all of those 5 conferences. So it's not just a Power 5 conference. It's just the largest schools that bring in the most talent and the most revenue.
Okay, so the 5 actually refers to 5 conferences. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like, oh, are these 5 schools? Okay, so the revenue that these schools are generating off of the athletes, they also, the way that I understand it, they use it not just to help the non-revenue generating sports. They use it to help like their academic programs. They use it to research, like they're using it for they're using it for every aspect. It doesn't just go into athletics. Is that correct?
Yes, that can be true because a lot of the big schools are Power 5 schools. Like, say, for example, like a Duke or a Michigan, their endowments are so large that it doesn't necessarily have to go back into athletics. It can go into other things. So.
Right. Thank you. So, okay. So now I'm getting to my real question because I wanted to like make sure I understood. All right. So as we know, Black Lives Matter has raised the collective consciousness in the country in all of the ways that Black lives have not mattered, right? And how Black people can exercise their power to impact change. In The Atlantic last year, Jamel Hill wrote a piece titled, "It's Time for Black Athletes to Leave White Colleges." I'm sure you all have heard of it, right? She was essentially arguing that Black athletes should choose HBCUs over PWIs because many HBCUs are working on a shoestring budget, yet at the same time, they are outsized in terms of developing the Black middle class, right? HBCUs produce 70% of African-American dentists and physicians, 80% of the country's Black judges, 40% of African-American members of Congress. And as a Spelman alum, I happen to know that we're the #1 producer of Black women who go on to get a PhD in a STEM field. So anyway, Hill goes on to say, Black athletes have attracted money and attention to the predominantly white universities that showcase them. And then she further says that D1 institutions are predominantly white, yet Black men make up only 2.4% of the total undergraduate population of the 65 schools in the Power 5 athletic conferences. Black men make up 55% of the football players in this conference, and 56% of the. Then Mo Williams, who was named head coach of the men's basketball program at Alabama State University, an HBCU, who was a former NBA player, after a series of tweets about the murder of George Floyd, he said, "A silent protest is pull your kids out of these D1 schools and enroll them in an HBCU. We talking about change, don't talk about it, be about it. I'm at Alabama State and can do exactly what they can do and more for your son. Point blank, period. Power 5 conferences are only Power 5 because we give them the power. Let's not talk about it, be about it. We can actually make a real change." So how much truth is it to the fact these athletes, could they actually create this type of change that Jamel Hill and Mo Williams and other athletes are talking about?
I definitely believe that these athletes can make this change happen. I think that the problem with HBCUs and some of their athletic programs is you don't bring a lot of revenue because current students aren't intrigued by the games because you might not have top talent or you might not be doing anything exciting, that their games may just be for the purists of the sport. So when you get elite athletes, 4 or 5 stars to come and play, people hear so much about them. They're like, I have to go check them out. For example, when Josh Christopher, he was a 5-star recruit in the class, in the last high school class that just graduated. He took his visit to Howard. There was so much coverage on it. He ended up going to Arizona State. But players like that really are able to make a change. Mikey Williams putting 5 HBCUs in his top 10. That's getting so much coverage. Everyone's looking at him to possibly change the world. Makur Maker, he committed to Howard as a 5-star. So now that brings a recognition to the HBCU program. And another example, after Deion Sanders now that Deion Sanders is the football coach for Jackson State, I went on Twitter and I saw a SEC page covering news on the SWAC.
Why is that? What is SEC like? Why is that relevant?
That's really big that an SEC page is covering it because the SEC houses schools like Alabama and LSU. So that's one of your Power 5 conferences, and some news outlet that covers a Power 5 conference coming and talking about Jackson State. That's big. That brings a lot of coverage. That brings a lot of people who may not know about it. They just know Deion Sanders' name, but now they're getting introduced to the program. So I do think these athletes can make the change because all it takes is just to go to those schools. Because at the end of the day, people are going to watch whoever is good wherever they're at. It's just plain and simple like that. Whoever's the best, wherever they go, they're going to watch them. So if you got 5 stars at Duke, they're going to watch them. If you got 5 stars at Akron, they're going to watch them. If you got 5 stars at Hampton or Howard, they're going to watch them.
I also think that when it comes to talent, of course, if you put talent on a football field, the people are going to flock. You put talent on a basketball field, a basketball court, they're going to flock. But I also think one of the issues for HBCUs that we don't look at in terms of just like sports management facilities, I know specifically for Howard, one of our issues are even when we do have a great competitive sports, in terms of basketball, we only can seat so many. So in terms of marketing your school sport, we can't market the way a Georgetown or another great university in DC would, because all of the people can't fit within our building.
How does money given to these said athletes impact their decisions? I have no idea how frequent this is. Student athletes getting money under the table from boosters and things like that when they're in college. But I'm wondering, how does this impact their decision making?
I think, especially right now, with just the climate of the NCAA in terms of just athletes trying to make money off their name and likeness, if someone's going to give you something under the table, it may definitely be impactful to where you may end up. Because right now, athletes are fighting for their likeness and their name, while these institutions are making hundreds of millions of dollars off these athletes. giving these students stipends and just letting them know that they have popularity and they can visit the great amenities, maybe it's not enough for some athletes. So they may decide to take the money that's under the table and go to a school other than the HBCU or a school where they can get that money. So I think it depends on your socioeconomic status, but it definitely depends. I think it would definitely be enticing for someone who doesn't have money.
If that's sense.
That's interesting. I've definitely heard, not necessarily that students are getting money under the table, but the fact that, you know, the argument about whether or not, the whole thing about NCAA saying if you're a student athlete, you don't get paid anything. And people saying, okay, well, these schools are making millions of dollars and we don't know about the financial status of some of the students that are playing for them. So I've heard that the change can actually be started with basketball because as it relates to facilities, I've heard that there is a major difference when it comes to football, but with basketball, not so much. I don't really follow college sports, or I didn't know what the Power Five was, but there's something really powerful about Mo Williams saying essentially that it's only the Power Five because of Black athletes, and that it is power if you understand that you hold power. So there was a New York Times article that came out in July named Black Lives Matter Protests Spawn Push for Athletes to Attend Historically Black Colleges. And Makur Maker, a star basketball recruit, chose Howard University over offers from UCLA and Kentucky and said he hoped other athletes would consider programs at historically Black institutions. The article goes on to say, as more top Black athletes express interest in HBCUs, they are signaling that Power 5 institutions may no longer hold the same allure. After Mo Williams' comments, NBA star Carmelo Anthony wrote, all it takes is one person to change history. Days after Williams' post, Nate Tabor, a top basketball player from Queens, withdrew his commitment from St. John's to sign with Norfolk State University. In the bubble, Chris Paul routinely wore HBCU apparel, and I know personally, like, that was all over the place. He was, like, doing a different HBCU. I don't know if it was every game, but it was pretty cool to see. And it was even written about in GQ. Do either of you feel the tide changing outside of just people talking about it and saying, you know, you can change this if you do that, but do you feel like it's more, oh, this one person did it and that one athlete did it, or is it like substantial amount of athletes really thinking about it?
I think with the premier Black talent deciding to attend HBCUs over PWIs, I think they're starting to realize, especially amid the racial turmoil and racial tensions within our nation right now that has persisted for years, they're beginning to start to realize that they have value. And they're asking themselves, these 17 and 18-year-olds at a young age are asking themselves, do we have value? Are we valued? And if not, where can we go to be valued and have the greatest impact? Mm-hmm. And I think that's truly important in their decision. But I also believe that by choosing to go to an HBCU, they're not choosing only basketball. They're going beyond basketball. They're going beyond the sport that they're playing. And that's super imperative to just the future generations in terms of creating a shift. They're definitely spawning a movement, and they're realizing that if we aren't valued here, we can go somewhere else to be valued. And honestly, that's the true power that Mo Williams was talking about. It's not about how many times you can dribble a basketball on a court or how far you can throw the football, but what can you do now that can spawn something greater for generations, so we don't have to continue to ask or to beg, can we be accepted or can we be represented properly? And with Makur Maker coming to Howard and when Makur Maker coming to Howard and say, hey, I want to be here. Joshua Christopher, he came and he visited and he decided that's not where he wanted to be. But even like Trey mentioned, Mikey Williams, he had he had a few HBCUs listed in his top 5. And that's just imperative to where we're going and where we're looking in the future. Do I think that is going to be immediate change? I don't think there will be immediate change. But however, I do think that they have the right.
There's the change will be gradual, definitely, because it's hard to get kids who are 16, 17, and 18 who had dreams of going to these Power 5 schools their whole life and have the opportunity it's hard to get them to turn that down because of a trend that kind of sparked up at the wrong time for them. But it influences players, 15 and under. So it influences players like that. And all like we were saying, you just need one person to make the change. So you just need a few people. And essentially, as those pioneering players who go to the HBCUs, you may not have the best facilities and best resources at your hand, but you are helping build that program. And that also allows you to solidify a legacy that will maintain more at a HBCU rather than a PWI. Because if you say you are a one and done at a PWI, there are hundreds of players who have gone one and done or have left their impact at a school and gone to the league. You kind of just like belong in that club. But say you're a student that goes to a HBCU, leaves an impact, and then goes to the draft, and now you're solidified in that history forever. For example, NBA player Kyle O'Quinn, he played for the New York Knicks at one point, but he attended Norfolk State, and he went to Norfolk State. They went to March Madness and even managed to win a couple of games. So now Kyle O'Quinn is solidified in Norfolk State history. Nobody's ever going to forget about him. Rick Mahorn with Hampton, played for Hampton, went to the NBA, played. Nobody's ever going to forget him. But, once you go to these PWIs, it's easy to get lost.
I think with this move, it's definitely a legacy booster in terms of just like, there's so much Black talent that actually made it to the professional leagues. I know Antoine Bidet, he has a whole facility center within Howard University's Burr. So you're definitely just leaving an impact on the students. And just with this move, like Trey and I said, it's not just a move for now, it's a move for future generations, like those 15 and 60-year-old players. And just from it coming from 17 to 18-year-old, that's just huge in itself, that they can think so far ahead and think so long-term being so young.
You make an important point. Both of you touched on legacy, and Kyra, you said something about it's not about just basketball. I think about the way that social media has in many ways democratized things. So, there are institutions and media outlets that were once seen as gatekeepers, but due to social media, people can now definitely elevate their brand, their profile. They can take control of their image. They can take control of that with social media. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is food, right? Yes, you have the New York Times, the food section and the reviews and what that does for them. But think about how chefs and people who are like, even like home cooks, they can create this huge following just with Instagram without no one ever writing about them. You know what I mean? So like, if you think about how social media has taken the power from some of these quote unquote gatekeepers who had the power to pick winners and losers, that power has been taken from them somewhat, right? It's shifted. So speaking of Chris Paul and the GQ article from August that Nava mentioned, that article was actually called Chris Paul's HBCU Bubble Looks Are More Than Fashion. He was quoted in that article by saying, "I'm not where I am today without my experience at Wake Forest, but I was also lucky to be right down the street from Winston-Salem University. Honestly, deep down inside, I wish I'd had the opportunity to attend an HBCU. They mean everything to me. I think that the funding, the facilities when it comes to athletics is one of the biggest things that has to change. When I was coming through high school and college, we all thought we had to go to these big schools to be seen and to be showcased. But in today's world with social media, if some of these kids got together and went to different HBCUs, imagine the attention that these schools would get." So we've talked about issues, as it relates to like what the issue is with HBCUs and also what it would mean for that revenue and how it would impact the facilities. But separately, like as we talked about how that revenue helps with other things, like it helps with these programs, research programs and academic programs and just other sports in general, we know how these athletes could actually even impact the Black American community at large. Not even just a legacy on athletics. Like we're talking about like the amount of judges, the amount of Congress people, senators, like I mean, we've all, I don't know if you saw that article about the fact that they said that Black children have better outcomes if they're cared for by a Black pediatrician. Like, this is actual data, right? And then when we think about the fact that 70% of Black physicians and dentists are educated at HBCUs. So like all of this, like thinking about their legacy, thinking about how it's not just about basketball. What is a collective effort among, let's say, the graduating high school class of 2021, the basketball players and the football players? Like, what does this actually look like? Does it start with conversations with the AAU, league? What does this actually look like in practice to make a collective effort?
I think it looks like how you said, I think it starts with the conversations and introducing you to the whole rainbow of HBCUs, because there is a tendency to talk about the same HBCUs in every aspect.
Which would be which schools?
You get your tendencies of Spelman, Hampton, Howard, Morehouse, North Carolina A&T, and you fall into that a lot. But, you have your colleges such as Winston-Salem or Livingstone or Clark Atlanta or Alabama A&M.
State.
So it starts with introducing you to the whole rainbow of HBCUs and allowing athletes to explore their interests outside of athletics, because that's another problem. A lot of athletes fall into the trap of athletics becoming their whole life, to where that's the only thing they understand. And eventually one day that ball gonna stop and you can get hurt, or you just don't advance any further up in the rankings, or, and so you may stop at college. You may not be able to be a professional. So now they go through kind of a very rough period in their life trying to figure out what they like. But it starts with introducing everyone to all HBCUs and seeing what caters to them outside of athletics and seeing what HBCU fits for them. And then we can get into the athletic conversation.
I think it first starts with community. I think it goes beyond the sport. Some of these players are looking for community confidence, purpose, intentionality. And at HBCUs, those are the things that you get. They instill those very things into us. And like Trey said, it's going beyond athletics. Who are you as a person? How can you give back to your community? What do you want to give back to your community? Are you a person of truth and service? I know for Howard University, that's our mission, truth and service. And when you leave that campus, you know that your purpose is greater than what you thought it was when you first came in. A lot of people think that we choose the HBCUs, but my thing at Howard is Howard chose me. It instilled so many things into me that I don't think I would have received. I would have went to Syracuse, Rutgers here in Jersey. Those things I don't think those things can be taught at PWI. There are certain things that only HBCUs can give to you when you see a representation of yourself every day at a campus. When you know that Toni Morrison or Chadwick Boseman or anyone else could have walked the same halls that you have. And it gives you this sense of purpose, it gives you this sense of confidence that it's just a match.
Are there any high school athletes that make you hopeful right now in terms of potentially selecting an HBCU?
What grade is Mikey Williams in?
Mikey is a sophomore right now. So like Kyra was saying, I definitely believe in Mikey as because he definitely has sparked a huge movement. And another thing is, he's a sophomore in high school with 2.6 million followers on Instagram, and he's already verified. Recently, Drake just put him in an OVO commercial for his new merch. So this kid is celebrity status as a sophomore in high school, talking about going to HBCUs. So the cameras are everywhere. He just made the recent move from San Diego to North Carolina and already has people covering his games when he literally just made that move within the past week or so. Was
this a club team you're saying? You're saying he moved high schools?
Yeah, he moved high schools.
Okay.
So this kid is a celebrity in all honesty. So he gives a lot of hope, and I would hope that he would go to an HBCU because he's the first one talking about it, and he's gonna by the time he's a senior, he'll be talking about this for 4 years. So if he doesn't go to HBCU, it may raise some eyebrows, but hopefully he goes to HBCU. Number one, I'm hoping he goes to Hampton because his mother was a tennis athlete at Hampton.
Oh,
So
you
I'm
know, I
hoping
was
he
going
comes there.
to ask you, I was like, I bet you he has an HBCU panel. I've been reading about, is he the same class as LeBron James's son?
Yes. Yes.
So he's another one that I've read about. So like, he's somebody who definitely, I think if he chose an HBCU would be a big deal, right?
That would be a huge deal. I feel like that in news, the timeliness of that and the relevance of that move, that would be in the news cycle for months. And that doesn't typically happen unless it's COVID or a pandemic or something groundbreaking like war. But if he decides to go to an HBCU, that just shifts the culture.
Yeah.
You would feel it. You would definitely feel it.
Yeah, that like gives me goosebumps actually.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah, just because like, if you think about LeBron James in and of himself, like how he can galvanize people.
Well, Kyra and Trey, thank you so much for chatting with us. This was a great conversation, and this is my last question, and it's the last question no matter what we're filming. So, as you know, the podcast is curated by the Iconoclast Dinner Experience. It's your last night on Earth. Where are you eating?
I would have to say, and I know you guys we're all going to get this reference being from Jersey. I would have to say I'm going to eat somewhere around Liberty State Park. Somewhere around there, around like an evening time, just being able to like catch in the views like of all the buildings. It's a really nice area over there. Yeah, I'll probably go to Liberty State Park to eat my last meal.
And look at the skyline before the world comes to an end. I love that.
Yeah.
But I would definitely go back to Utahville, South Carolina, to my Aunt Eileen's house and have a last meal with all of my aunties who cook. That's my family. We're really big on family. So that's where my last meal would be. Utahville, South Carolina, at my Aunt Eileen's house with all of the family around. That's how I want my last meal to be.
What is your aunt cooking?
Cooking chicken, hash, red beans and rice, cabbage, just everything. Everyone would help too. It would be such a great setting just to end it off with your family. Definitely.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the
conversation.
You guys.